Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMA LOTN. This week we're going over UFC Vegas 3, which is headlined by Curtis Blaydes and Alexander Volkov. Big heavyweight fight in terms of rankings. Curtis Blaydes, he's always going to have to worry about Francis Ngannou. As long as Francis Ngannou is hovering around the top, Curtis Blaydes probably won't get a title shot. Or if he does, it will have to be off of Francis Ngannou coming off a loss. Solid card coming up here. I'm glad that we're in the second last week of consecutive fight weeks that we've had now since the UFC's back. Very much looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to that 1 weekend off just so I can start to catch up again. Again, these podcasts have been coming out later than usual, and I'm really stumped about that. But hoping to get the June 27th podcast or for that event, that one out earlier than these last two have. But come July 11th, which is UFC 251, we should be fully back on schedule. We have July 11th, July 15th event, and a July 18th event. So we got, again, one of those three events in 1 week spurts. But I'm really looking forward to getting into the tape for those cards, and I see a lot of juicy prospects there in terms of potential bets. So let's go over my last event, UFC Vegas 2, before we continue on forward with this Vegas 3 event. Lock of the Night play whiffs on a stupid bet on my end. The rule set that I set out for myself numerous times. Don't bet on debuting fighters. And now I've had to stretch it to don't bet on a debuting fighter, even if it's his, debut against another guy making his debut. Fuck. He just can't get it. Anthony Ivy comes in there and looks like, comes into this fight based on his tape looking like a guy that really uses his grappling very well, is able to really close distances on guys, has decent enough striking to close the distance and then get his grappling going and then really start wailing on guys. Wasn't able to do that. Christian Aguilera just said, fuck it. Swung punches forward, and eventually caught Anthony Ivy and just put him out. Probably one of the more demoralizing losses of my Lock of the Night plays. I actually had that parlayed with Julia Avila, and I expected Julia Avila to go out there and get the finish. And that probably should have been the Lock of the Night play. She went in there and absolutely bodied Gina Mazzeni the way I was expecting her to. Minus 130 was the inside the distance line, and that probably should have been the bet now that I'm thinking about it. But so half of the parlay hits, half the parlay loses, but that obviously means that the parlay misses. Minus 5 units there. We also had Calvillo 0.75 units at plus 265 to win inside the distance. She whiffs on that. She got the positions I expected her to get, but I think it really came down to the strength of Jessica Ai here as to why Calvillo wasn't able to get her arms free to really, start to threaten with that rear naked choke, which I believe was her best path to victory. But it turns out that her wrestling was enough, her striking was enough, and she absolutely put on a clinic against Jessica Ai there. And again, just as I said in that podcast, absolutely stumped behind the love that Jessica Ai was getting going into that fight. So, minus 0.75 units there. And then one of the Dog of the Night plays, under 2.5 on the Maria Agapova and Hannah Cypher's fight, 1 unit at plus 156. Love that play. I should have went a little bit deeper on that, but again, hindsight is 2020. We end the event minus 4.19 units. The rough stretch continues, but I'm hoping to break that spell with the event that we have coming up this weekend at UFC Vegas 3. Overall, as a card, decent spots all around in terms of entertaining fights and fights that have a little bit of repercussions for the division. Fights that really stand out to me is the debut of Max Rohskopf against Austin Hubbard. That's a very intriguing fight. Justin Jaynes stepping in on super short notice against Frank Camacho. The return of the Savage, Gillian Robertson. Have a play on that fight. Just continue watching and you guys will figure out what that play is. Love her. Oskar Piechota versus Marc-Andre Barriault should be a very fun fight. The return of the Bull, Brianna Van Buren. That's a very fun fight too. Roosevelt Roberts making a very quick turnaround after his win over Brock Weaver a couple weeks ago. Comes in against a vet now against Jim Miller. That's a great fight. Shane Burgos versus Josh Emmett is a fire fight. I'm very, very excited for that one. And then obviously the main event headlined by Alexander Volkov and Curtis Blaydes. Big stakes in the heavyweight division here. And whoever gets the victory here really moves forward. Alexander Volkov, only lost against Derek Lewis, and he was about 11 or 12 seconds away from winning that fight. So a win here could definitely really rise him in the rankings and potentially put him in line for a title shot after Francis Ngannou gets a shot. Yeah, great fight, great card, solid card, maybe not great card, solid card, and should tie us over until next week, which is when we get Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker, which is just an absolute amazing main event that I can't wait to break down for you guys. Yeah, so I won't keep you guys too much for the breakdowns now. Just a reminder, all these breakdowns have been released early for my Patreon members. So if you guys want to hit up the Patreon for early access to these breakdowns, again, as soon as I record them, I put them out and I give them to my Patreon members ASAP. And then I got a bunch of other perks on that as well. So just check the description below of this podcast or this video, and you'll see everything else that you get with my Patreon as well as the Patreon link. So make sure you guys check that shit out. All right, I'm not going to keep you guys from it any longer. Let's get into the breakdowns for this card. Austin Hubbard versus Max Rohskopf. Let's just go with his first name. Max is making his UFC debut, coming in as a highly touted prospect who's sitting at 5-0 currently. The term prospect and heavy, especially, is definitely showing in the betting lines. He's coming in as a -185 favorite. There has been some action on him to push him to that number, and he's 5-0 currently. There's a couple fights out there of him, especially that we have on the tape index that you guys can find out just to, see what kind of fighter he is. But the one thing that's been very obvious is that most of his fights don't go that long. So we don't really have a good tell, or at least a good vision on what his cardio could look like. Because more often than not, this guy just goes for it. And when he goes for it, more often than not, he gets to finish. The longest fight that he's had is his MMA debut or pro MMA debut, where he got a rear naked choke with 3 minutes and 11 seconds into the second round. Unfortunately, I just was not able to track down any information, or at least the video of that fight. So I didn't really see, what went into that, how much he was exerting himself, how much cardio he actually used, and would he have been, tested the same way that Austin Hubbard will be able to test him with the gas tank that he has. So, when you have these prospects come into the UFC, you need to take into account a lot of different things. Finally making it to the big stage, fighting guys that have, that type of experience, which Austin Hubbard does. There's just so much that has to go into it, that you can't just come onto the scene and assume that you're going to start wrecking house. This might be a little bit early for him. He's 25 years old, has 5 fights under his belt, obviously coming in from a collegiate wrestling background. Apparently he didn't even place or anything in the NCAAs, but he was just so highly touted, and it's kind of showing in his MMA performances. The good thing about what he's doing, and what not a lot of wrestlers do before actually coming into MMA, is working the hell out of their jiu-jitsu, because what good is wrestling if you're just going to lay on top of the guy? More often than not, the referee's going to pull you off, right? So there's not, you need to find ways to work from the top, to threaten with submissions, to open up guard passes, or to open up any type of pass on the ground, anywhere. So far, I like what I've seen from the kid. I like that he attacks submissions a lot. He loves the anaconda choke. He loves the Darce choke. Has a couple, what is he at? Rear naked choke, rear naked choke, rear naked choke, anaconda choke. So a ton of submission victories on his record. All he's ever won by is submission. So I'm interested to see what he's able to bring to the table against Austin Hubbard here. And in terms of size, I think Hubbard might have a slight advantage. No, it's Max Rohskopf. I need to see them side by side to really determine who is the bigger guy. But Hubbard seems like a big guy in there, especially when in his last fight against Marco Madsen. Now, Marco Madsen, silver medalist in Greco wrestling, very strong, has a ton of experience, but his cardio, lacked in that fight. He was able to secure the first 2 rounds, so it didn't really come into play as long as he was able to just, survive that 3rd round. And Hubbard was really coming on there. Great leg kicks, great knees. Apparently his nickname Thud comes from the sound that he makes whenever he lands leg kicks in the gym. You definitely believe it, especially after watching that Marco Madsen fight. You got to assume it's kind of going to go similar, but the difference here being Max and his jiu-jitsu pedigree that he has and how he's always chasing submissions. So, Hubbard's going to have to be very on point with his jiu-jitsu. He's working over there with Elliot Marslow, Cody Donovan, and those guys in Denver. So cardio on point, solid team behind him too. If he's been working his submission defense, and we already know his cardio is good, so as long as he's been working his submission defense and he can stay out of any crazy chokes that Max throws at him, he's definitely a very live dog here. The main concern for me in this fight is we just don't know what the cardio and gas tank of Max is, especially if it goes over this 1.5 mark. It burned me last time betting on a UFC debut, and even though he fought another UFC debut, and I'm not looking to fucking travel down that road one more time. I like Hubbard here just because of the versatility that he brings to the game. His for sure cardio that we can depend on. A decent handling of how he took Marco Madsen's wrestling. But again, the main difference here being Max having a better jiu-jitsu background than Marco Madsen at that time. So there's just too many unknowns. I don't find a reason as to why you should be playing Max at minus 185. I think Hubbard has some value at the current line he's at. Plus 160. Yeah, I think there's some definite value there. The under 2.5 is possibly live too, in case Max does have an absolutely shit gas tank, and Austin Hubbard goes in there and withstands the initial grappling onslaught that he's supposed to be enduring, and then goes out there and just TKOs Rohskopf. I'm gonna try his name, Rohskopf. It's a simple name to say, but it's just spelled so weird that it's kind of just throwing me off a little bit. But either way, I think he could withstand it and then finish Rohskopf late. But I'll probably stay away from betting this fight. Just kind of sit back and see what kind of game Max brings into his UFC debut. And I hope that we get to see a full 3 rounds out of him just to see what his cardio is like. So I'm going to go with Hubbard here to win by 3rd round TKO. But in terms of betting, I'm just going to stay away from this fight. Roxanne Modafferi versus Lauren Murphy. This fight is pretty much out of pick'em. We got minus 115 for Roxanne, minus 105 for Lauren Murphy. Let's start off with Roxanne Modafferi. She's coming off that unanimous decision victory over Macy Barber. That was a fight where she came in as a huge underdog, and then obviously Macy Barber went on to I believe she tore her ACL in that fight, and she continued fighting. So big props to Macy Barber for fighting through that injury, but she did suffer her first loss at the hands of a tough veteran in Roxanne Modafferi, who's coming into her 41st MMA fight, and that's very impressive, at least in women's MMA too. She's been around for a long time. She actually made her MMA debut in 2003, so she's been fighting professionally for at least 17 years. She always has her durability and her experience to lean on, which is why she's still able to pull off victories in certain fights. The Antonina Shevchenko fight, that was another one where she was a heavy underdog, but she was still able to find ways to get fights to the ground and really make it tough for Shevchenko to get up and make it a really dirty and grindy fight. Same thing in the Macy Barber fight. After she was able to, or after Macy Barber actually hurt herself, Modafferi was able to really take over with her grappling and her clinch game. That's where I think it gets a little bit hairy here for Lauren Murphy, because on the feet, I think that Murphy has a slight advantage. She works with the same striking coach as Derek Lewis, and I'm not trying to say that as like a compliment, nor am I trying to say it as an insult, but I believe his name is Bob Perez, Crew Bob Perez. I might be off on that, but you guys all know who he is if you guys see him, short, bald guy with the mustache. But yeah, he's always with Derek Lewis. But either way, it seems like he did decent work with her, especially leading into that Andrea Lee fight. I know it was a close fight, and I believe I scored that fight for Lee. I just can't remember off the top of my head right now. But we did see, when Andrea Lee was actually willing to exchange in the pocket, that Lauren Murphy was really sitting down on her shots and landing good shots too. She was able to bust up Andrea Lee a little bit, and it was definitely showing just, again, due to her striking. I think if this fight stays on the feet, Roxanne Modafferi could be in a little bit of trouble. Even though she's been fighting for 17 years, it just seems like mechanically with her body or something, she's just not able to throw the cleanest or the crisp strikes, or the technical strikes, I should say. Like it it just looks so awkward whenever she's striking, which is why she wants to get this fight to the ground ASAP, at least for the majority of her fights. That's where she has the most amount of success. I believe she'll have the jiu-jitsu advantage over Lauren Murphy here. If she could drag this fight to the ground, she could definitely make it a long, grueling night for Lauren Murphy. But if she's not, if Murphy stays on her bicycle, uses her kicks, makes Roxanne pay every time Roxanne tries to close the distance, it's going to be a tough night for Roxanne. The fact that the line's at a pick'em, it's the odds are worthy on either side. You got the grappling advantage for Roxanne Modafferi, and then the striking advantage for Lauren Murphy. And you guys know me, I always like to kind of side with the grappler, but in this instance, man, it's tough to really lean with Roxanne Modafferi. I'm passing this fight in absolution. Like, I'm not even bothering throwing one of these fighters into a parlay either. Like, even though that Roxanne is the grappler and this fight is at even money, and I think that just as good as I think, here we go, try to follow along. I think that Roxanne's grappling advantage is a way bigger advantage than Lauren Murphy's striking advantage here. But even with that, it's the closing of distance and getting the fight to the ground, which I have problems with for Roxanne here. Again, Lauren Murphy, not the craziest, heaviest striker either. She does have a finish via punches on her record, at least recently as well, too. I just want to confirm who that was. Yeah, that was the Mara Romero-Barella fight where she just absolutely put it on Mara there. I'm going to side with Lauren here. I think she does keep this fight on the feet, and I think she makes Roxanne pay the entire time. Yeah, I got to go with Lauren Murphy here. I think she's going to batter Roxanne Modafferi on the feet, stuff takedowns, maybe win the clinch exchanges as well if this does get into a clinch exchange. But her best bet is to, stay moving, land those big shots, get out of the way of any takedowns coming. And again, I don't think that Roxanne is that fast either, too. So it should be easier for Lauren Murphy to actually get out of the way here. So I'm going to side with Lauren Murphy here. I don't think she'll get the finish, again, because I think that Roxanne is quite durable as well, too. When was the last time she got finished via punches? It's been a long time since Roxanne. So the last time she got TKO'd was in 2013 during the Ultimate Fighter Season 18 from Jessica Rokosi, who was a really good boxer coming into MMA. And then before that, she got rear naked choked by Barb Honchak. She got slam KO'd by Sarah McMahon in 2010 in Strikeforce, armbarred by Marlis Kunin. Yeah, she is quite durable. I'll give her that. So I'm going to take Lauren Murphy to win by decision here. I just think she has the better striking. She'll be able to put it on Roxanne a little bit without getting taken down. And even if she does get taken down initially, I think she'll have a decent opportunity of getting back to her feet. But I like Lauren Murphy here, being slightly faster as well too. So I'll go with Lauren Murphy to win this fight via decision. Frank Camacho versus Justin Jaynes. Justin Jaynes is stepping in on quite short notice after... Who's Frank Camacho? Matt Frivola. Before Matt Frivola had to pull out earlier this week due to one of his cornermen, who ends up being Billy Quarantillo. He tested positive for COVID, so Frivola had to pull out of the fight, unfortunately. In steps Frank Camacho, and we have odds on this fight, minus 340 for Frank Camacho, plus 280 for Justin Jaynes. A little bit wide, even considering that Justin Jaynes is coming in on short notice here. Both guys are really good strikers. They both have a lot of power. I think Frank Camacho is a little bit more diverse with his striking. I'd be very surprised if either guy actually initiated the grappling here. If anybody, I think it would be Justin Jaynes, who is the one that does it. Frank Camacho just seems to have a little bit more of this like striking stand and bag type of pride about him compared to most guys. But Justin Jaynes could absolutely make things a little bit interesting, and he has a ton of power too. Frank Camacho is coming off that loss to Beneil Dariush last time around. Was it Beneil? I believe it was Beneil. Yeah, Beneil Dariush was his last loss, and that was a fight where Dariush really came out guns blazing, and I believe it really surprised Frank Camacho because he was hitting him with pretty much everything that he was throwing out there, and then eventually it opened up his grappling game, which is why he was able to secure that rear naked choke victory over Frank. But I think this fight is going to be more of a stand and bang type of fight. If Justin wants to get a little bit cheeky here, I could see him initiating the grappling, but he's going to have to eat some shots to get on the inside to actually achieve that. do not parlay Frank Camacho here. This is a very dangerous fight. And we've seen the durability of Frank Camacho slowly start to decline during his UFC career. So Justin Jaynes could absolutely go out there and knock out Frank Camacho. Do not, I repeat, do not put Frank Camacho in a parlay. It could absolutely blow up in your face. When he is on, like his Nick Hein fight, he looks unstoppable and he looks amazing. But my only concern is Justin Jaynes has a ton of power and he could potentially land on Frank Camacho here. I think if you're looking to play something on this fight, it would be the under. We're not 100% yet in term. We're not 100% sure what it's going to drop at, whether 1.5 or 2.5. I suspect it to be 1.5 due to the fact that it's minus 270 for the fight doesn't go to decision for this fight. But if it was under 2.5, I would probably play the 2.5. But I just don't see it being at that. I would be surprised if they do it at 2.5. But yeah, Justin Jaynes has just absolutely steamrolled his last couple of opponents, beating most of them within like a minute or 2 minutes. Let's just confirm those numbers. A minute and a half, 4 minutes, and 2 minutes. So, okay, maybe I was exaggerating with the minute or minute and a half, but still, all first-round victories where he just went over there and just steamrolled his opponents. Most of those guys didn't even seem like they wanted to be in there. If you guys saw my Twitter page earlier, I actually posted, his victory over Devin Brown. It was a guillotine choke victory where he was able to get it from full mount, but it seemed like the guy just wanted out. Like, it didn't even seem like the guy didn't tap and he faked going out to not really, face the embarrassment of tapping out per se. But that was a very shifty guillotine choke there. 5-2 record for that guy going into that fight, and then 8-5, and then fight after that, 23-13 after that. But now here he is finally in the UFC, and again, stiff test against Frank Camacho here. I will take Frank Camacho to win this fight by knockout, but again, just I can't trust Frank Camacho against a heavy hitter here like Justin Jaynes, who's been around the circuit for a while too. He's 15-4, 19 fights. It's just been a matter of time before he was finally going to be able to get there. But yeah, I'm going to take Frank Camacho, but not trusting him at minus 340. I'll stick with staying away from this fight or potentially playing the under depending on what they release it at. But I'll go with Frank Camacho by second round TKO. But just stay away from this fight. Gillian Robertson versus Cortney Casey. We got minus 115 on Gillian Robertson. Minus 105 on Cortney Casey, and Cortney Casey is making a relatively quick turnaround. She just submitted Mara Romero Barella at UFC Fight Night, whichever it was. I think it was Vegas 1, Vegas 2. It was the Wednesday card, if I'm not mistaken. But she got a 3.5 minute armbar victory over Mara Romero Barella, whereas Gillian Robertson is coming off a little bit of a layoff. She hasn't fought since October, where she lost via punches to Macy Barber, who just had the stricter and the much better striking in that fight. Sorry, just getting a couple of these things out of the way. But she was actually scheduled to fight Taylor Santos at this card, but Santos had to pull out, and in steps Cortney Casey. This is going to be a fun fight regardless. I like to call Gillian Robertson the female Nico Price, especially of the 115-pound division. And I'm hoping that my mic will pick this up, but I really want you guys to hear this. This is what she said after she submitted Veronica Macedo. I believe it was her second or third last fight, but this is what she said in the post-fight interview. So let me just run this 6 seconds. I need you guys to hear this. So I'm not sure if the mic was able to 100% pick that up, but what she was trying to say is that in jiu-jitsu, most people go for a position over submission, but she said, screw that, I do submission over position, which is why she's always, able to get finishes, or she is the one that actually gets finished. And that's why I actually, already went out on a limb here and played my second ever plus money lock of the night play, and that's the under 2.5 in this fight at plus 119. It's roughly around plus 115, plus 120, but the current run that she's on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight finishes or got finished, and that's including her Ultimate Fighter stint against Barb Honchak. But this woman brings it. Like, she makes it known that she's trying to get your ass down and she's trying to go for a submission, or she's going to go for a TKO like she did against Sarah Frota. This woman is relentless. Like, If she fails on a takedown attempt, she'll regroup for a couple, maybe 20 or 30 seconds, throw a couple of soft shots, but it's all in due to finally get this fight to the ground. I think she'll be able to get Cortney Casey down, and, she will be able to work guard passes, and she will be able to get to the positions that she wants. I'm just not 100% sure she will be the one getting the submission. Cortney Casey is very good off of her back, too. She has really good submissions, as we saw in the Mara Romero-Barella fight, and that fight against Randa Marcos as well, too. I believe she caught her with the rear naked choke, which was just a thing. Oh, sorry, that was an armbar. Just a thing of beauty with her jiu-jitsu too. And people can say what they want about Cortney Casey being a decision fighter, but it truly comes down to the type of fighter that she's fighting to determine whether she'll be able to get finished, or not. Randa Marcos is one of the fights that definitely comes to mind here, because in that stage of Randa Marcos's career, she was fighting the Gillian Robertson way of fighting, where she was just, I'm going to keep going for takedowns. I'm going to try to get you to the ground, try to ground and pound you, try to always go, go, go. And that's what Cortney Casey was able to capitalize on. And she may be able to have the same success here against Gillian Robertson in terms of finding Gillian Robertson slipping. Robertson is just go, go, go from the bat. And you got to think that's going to have a detriment on her gas tank in that second round, maybe even that early third round. I don't see this fight going past the second round. I think within that, that 10-minute span, one of these women will either be able to get a submission, they'll be able to get a TKO, or regardless, be able to get a finish. Again, you only need one legitimate ingredient in a fight for it to go, under 1.5 or 2.5. And in this fight, it's got to be Gillian Robertson. More often than not, I will always bet the under in a Gillian Robertson fight, just because of how she fights and her approach. And the reason I call her the Nico Price of this division is because Nico Price does the exact goddamn same thing. I just want to pull up his, what his run of finishes currently looks like, but he's always the one kill or be killed. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 straight. Since he's been in the UFC, has not seen the judges' scorecards. He was very close to seeing the judges' scorecards in this fight against Vicente Luque, in a fight that he was arguably winning. Not saying that he would have gotten the judges' nod at the end there, but he did a really good job in that fight against Vicente Luque. But what I'm trying to get at is that these Nico Price and Gillian Robertson are not point fighters. These are These are finishers. They go out there and their sole purpose is to try to find the finish. They want to get that performance bonus, and I think that's what Gillian Robertson is going to try to do here, just against Cortney Casey as well too. And I expect when Robertson starts to slow down a little bit, that Casey's going to be able to start to really take advantage, especially when he gets into these grappling situations. I could absolutely see her getting reverse positions and sweeps and ending up on top and landing big shots from on top, opening up a submission and getting that submission themselves. But I think it's actually going to be Gillian Robertson. I think Robertson's going to be the one that gets the finish. And I have heard the narrative out there that, okay, look, Claudia Gadelha, couldn't finish Cortney Casey and she got her down a couple times. The difference between Claudia Gadelha and Gillian Robertson is the fact that, as I've been saying this entire breakdown, Gillian Robertson is a fucking finisher. She's a savage. She is rightfully nicknamed. Claudia Gadelha is just she's point fighting. She's point fighting, and then she's also fighting herself in terms of making sure she doesn't gas. And that's how most of Casey Cortney's, Casey Cortney, that was a weird one. But that's how Cortney Casey's fights kind of go. She fights to the level of her competition in terms of the type of, the type of pace and pressure that they want to bring. Claudia Gadelha is not a finisher. Jessica Aguilar is not a finisher. Felice Herrig is not a finisher. Michelle Watterson, not a finisher. Angela Hill, this is Angela Hill taking every fucking fight, not a finisher. Cynthia Calvillo, a bit of a finisher, but she just did not go for the takedowns as much as I thought she would have in that fight. She kind of outboxed Cortney Casey in that fight, but she didn't really show that style that she likes to fight, which is, relentless takedowns, just as she did against Jessica Ai. Gillian Robertson is going to be the one. She is the main ingredient that we need here to win this under 2.5. So I went 4 units at plus 119 on the under 2.5 here. But in terms of picking a side, tough for me to say. I like Gillian Robertson. I like the skill set that she brings and the mentality that she brings. So I'm going to side with her. I'm going to say she gets the second round, either TKO or submission. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Casey, take advantage of a possible gas tank dump on Gillian Robertson's end and gets that late second round finish. So either way, I'll go with Gillian Robertson, second round TKO or sub. But the under 2.5, that's the lock of the night play for this card. Oskar Piechota versus Marc-Andre Barriault. We got -120 on Piechota and plus 100 on Marc-Andre Barriault. Let's start off with Oskar Piechota. Both guys are actually coming off of 3 losses here, so you gotta believe that the loser is probably out of a job. And that's kind of unfortunate. There's been a tough run for, we'll start off with Piechota, like I said. Gerald Meerschaert in a fight that he almost had Meerschaert finished in that first round. Meerschaert just guts it out, comes back in that second round and gets the finish himself. Rodolfo Vieira, he did a decent job of surviving on the ground against a high-level black belt in Rodolfo Vieira until he finally got choked out in the second round as well, too. And then Punahele Soriano landed a beautiful, I believe it was an uppercut that absolutely put out Oskar Piechota, and then Punahele was able to finish him off with what's a little bit of ground and pound. Piechota is like one of those guys that goes out there and just tries to get the finish. He likes to empty his gas tank, really searches for the finish, really likes to squeeze on chokes, and kind of that's a little bit of a detriment to his cardio, which he probably needs to survive the rest of the round if he's not able to find the finish, and that's obvious in his fights against Gerald Meerschaert and Rodolfo Vieira. In the Tim Williams fight, he was able to get the finish quickly, so we didn't really need to see much of that. And then in the Jonathan Wilson fight, that was one of the few fights that we actually saw him go the full 15 minutes, but I think against higher competition, he would have a little bit more trouble, sustaining that gas tank. Marc-Andre Barriault, this is a guy that I actually have seen since the amateur scene. When I used to work with the MMA gym back in the day, we used to take all of our amateurs out to Montreal, and they used to have amateur MMA fights on the native reserve that's just south of Montreal, and that's actually where I initially saw Marc-Andre Barriault. The next time I saw him was when he fought one of our pro guys, Todd Stout. He was coming up a weight class and actually won the title at middleweight and light heavyweight, so he was a champ over in TKO before he finally came over to the UFC, and since he's been in the UFC, he's on an 0-3 run. Tough losses. The Andrew Sanchez fight got completely out-grappled there. Even in that third round, Andrew Sanchez was just digging really deep to just hold on to Barriault, tried to minimize any damage coming towards him, and he was successful in doing so. Krzysztof Jotko had a decent performance against him too, and then Jun Young Park, just showed he had great hands, was the more active fighter, and that really, messed with Andre Barriault. I think the -125 on the under 2.5 is a little bit interesting here because I feel like Barriault does have the finishing abilities to finish Oskar Piechota if Piechota doesn't get to him first. So I think that it's tough to really choose a side here. It might be a dog or pass situation. At an even line, I still kind of lean towards it's tough. Like you can't. It's tough to back a guy that just empties his gas tank, and if he's not able to capitalize on the finish, then it's really unfortunate for him, and then the opponent is really going to be able to take over. So I just don't feel comfortable putting my money on Piechota, even though he has a high. I think he has a good chance of getting a finish early in this fight too. Marc-Andre Barriault, again, I am slightly impressed with him, but nothing overly. I think if there's a play on this fight, it's the under 2.5. I think either Piechota gasses himself out trying to finish this fight in under 1.5. Otherwise, Andre Barriault, he shows he has a decent gas tank. Even after getting grapple fucked by Andrew Sanchez for 2 rounds, he's still doing his best to stay away. Sanchez did a really good job of stifling Barriault in that third round. I think Piechota will have a tougher time doing the exact same thing that Andrew Sanchez did. And I think Sanchez is the better wrestler, the stronger guy too. So I think he was able to impose his will a little bit better than I believe Oskar will be able to. So in terms of picking a side, I'll go with Barriault here, probably to win by second round TKO or third round TKO. But yeah, the under 2.5 is probably the play here. In terms of picking a side, gun to my head, I'm picking Barriault, but this fight's going to be a pass for me. Tecia Torres versus Brianna Van Buren. We got -225 on Brianna Van Buren and +185 on Tecia Torres. Let's start off with the UFC sophomore in Brianna Van Buren. She's coming off a big victory over Livia Hanata Souza last time around. She was actually scheduled to fight Hannah Cyphers back in January, but Van Buren had to pull out due to injury. But here she is stepping in against Tecia Torres. So Brianna Van Buren training out of AKA, probably one of the smaller women in the division too. So luckily for her, she's going up against another smaller woman in this division, in Tecia Torres. And I think both of these women would be would benefit very much from a 105-pound division. I keep harping on the 105-pound division whenever we talk about these smaller ladies like Hannah Cifers, like Brianna, like Tecia as well too. But I'm intrigued to know if Tecia would even be able to make 105. That girl is thick, like THICCC. Thick Boy Bike Club, move over. We got Tecia Torres here. She's cut and ripped like a motherfucker, but and that definitely translates into her strengths as well too. So Brianna Van Buren, we know that she likes to have a grappling centric game plan. She likes to close the distance, try to lull you into thinking that it's going to be a striking battle, and then she runs a blast double, and she more often than not she lands those. She has had issues in the past in terms of getting women down, notably Amy Montenegro, which was actually her last MMA loss. In that fight, she had a lot of trouble getting Amy down, and Amy was just a bigger fighter too. My concern here is wondering if Brianna is going to have trouble overpowering or getting Tecia Torres down. I believe she will be successful in getting her down. My concern is whether she'll be able to hold her down. And then if she's not able to hold her down, is she going to be able to take the striking of Tecia Torres? And Tecia is a very quick striker, and Brianna Van Buren is getting better in the striking realm. Like every fight, we see a more improved version of her striking game, and I think that's something to continue to look at and know that on a fight-by-fight basis, it's something that's going to continue to get better. But I still think that Tecia has the slightly smoother hands, the crisper hands. I'm not sure. I highly doubt this fight's going to go to a finish. So, both women don't really pack too much of power. But again, their speed and timing is actually pretty good. I give the slight advantage to Tecia Torres on the feet. Brianna is still she's still a bit of a work in progress, and she's not complete dog shit on the feet. I'm not saying that in any means. She does show good combinations. She does show a good, morphing her striking into her grappling. She does very well in terms of like throwing 1-2 and then just switching it into or changing levels and then switching into a takedown. She does a really good job with that. I am kind of high on her, but in this spot, I'm a little bit skeptical. Like, I don't know what to really expect from Tecia Torres, who herself is coming off a pretty crazy stretch right now. She's coming off of 4 straight losses, but we're talking about 3 of the top women in that division too, and one of them who's possibly going to be fighting for a title soon. You're talking about Jessica Andrade, who went on after that to win the title. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who is coming off her title losses and all that. Weili Zhang, who is now the champion, and then Marina Rodriguez, who, I believe she has a main event coming up against Carla Esparza, and if she's able to get past Carla, it's pretty much the top of division for her. So Tecia has been fighting really, really good talent, and that might be actually taking away a little bit of the love for her from a lot of people. They see that she's just on a 4-fight winning streak and she doesn't really have her shit together. And then on the other side, they see a young, hungry prospect on the rise going up against a perceived vet who's on the decline. And I'm not 100% behind that. She did show good exchanges in her Marina Rodriguez fight. She did very well against, not very well, but she did well enough against the now champion Weili Zhang. She's able to get her down a couple times, ride out on top. I'm intrigued to know what Brianna is like off of her back. Her jiu-jitsu is a little bit of a work in progress still too. I think Tecia would be able to overpower her. Probably if this fight even takes place in the clinch position against the cage, I could see Tecia being the stronger fighter here. I don't feel comfortable laying the money on Brianna at -225. And again, this was another fighter that I was coming into this fight thinking that I'm going to possibly play them as the dog of the night play, as the lock of the night play. Not happening. I'm not confident enough. I even came out on the other side thinking that I might make a little bit of a play on Tecia Torres. Again, I gotta really consider it. I'm not 100% sold on it. Part of me kind of likes Jim Miller a little bit better. But yeah, I think Tecia has a solid chance here. If she's able to keep this fight on the feet, she should be able to land the stinging shots, the crisp shots, the quick shots, and she could, kind of output her way to victory here. But it all comes down to her stopping the takedowns. And, I could see Brianna landing the first couple, but after that, Tecia should be able to really get it together. And I think her grappling statistics or her takedown statistics are drastically skewed due to her fight against Jessica Andrade, who was obviously the stronger fighter there. She was able to ragdoll Tecia Torres in those situations. I don't know if Brianna will have the same success in doing the exact same thing. Or be able to land 10 takedowns in one fight against Tecia Torres. So that's where it comes, where the questions start to come. And I need to see a little bit more from Brianna, especially at this level. Tecia Torres is, I hate to call her a gatekeeper because I believe she's talented, but at this point in time, she's kind of the gatekeeper in terms of seeing which prospects are going to be able to get past her, and those prospects could go on to do bigger and better things in that division. So, just to go out on a limb here, I'm going to go with Torres to win this fight by decision. Again, I really wanted to pick the bull, but it's tough. I need to see a little bit more from her. She looked really good in her last time around, but I don't want people to get sucked into that Tyleel. I call it the Tyleel effect, where if you guys remember, Khalil Roundtree comes in against Eric Anders after a training camp in Thailand, and he absolutely leg kicks the shit out of Eric Anders and not finishes him, but like puts on an absolute 15-minute beating on him. And then he comes out in the next fight, gets wrestled by Ian Kutalaba, and then gets, I believe he got TKO'd in that fight. So I don't want, that's why I call that the Tyleel effect. You need to be sure that this is the fighter that you believe you're betting on. So maybe after this fight, I'll be a little bit more of a believer in Brianna. But as of right now, I like Tecia Torres, and I'll take her to win by decision. But it's dog or pass here, in my opinion. Dog or pass, not 100% sure if I'll actually be placing the money on Torres here, but I will take her to win this fight by decision. Bobby Green versus Clay Guida. We got minus 250 for Bobby Green, plus 210 for Clay Guida. Let's start off for Bobby King Green. He's coming off of 2 losses to Francisco Trinaldo and Drakkar Klose, both decision losses. And that's kind of where his the detriment in his skill set comes. It seems like he's a little bit too content to go to a decision in most of his fights because of his lack of output. And that's what's concerning. It's sometimes because he has all the skill. His striking is great. His durability is great. He got knocked out by Dustin Poirier way back in 2016, but he's shown a great chin for the better part of his career. But the only thing has been just his lack of fight IQ / lack of really wanting to put it on his opponents. And that's where I think this matchup against Clay Guida gets things a little bit skeptical, because skill for skill, I think Bobby Green could absolutely beat Clay Guida here, and he is the better fighter, but it comes down to what the judges see, and what the judges see is a lot of movement from Clay Guida. If he's able to stay away from the big punch and maybe, really rely on his chin a little bit here just to land a couple of shots and get out and be the one that's actually giving more output here, Clay Guida could absolutely win this fight. Again, it's hard to trust Bobby Green, especially at that minus 250 price tag, because you're banking on him to show his skill set and then, add the activity and output to it as well too. Betting on Bobby Green here, you're probably expecting him to get the finish, even though most of his victories have now come by decision. You got to think that he's gonna want to win this fight by finish. You can't leave. Most of his fights have been really close again, like I've said. But when you're talking about a cardio machine like Clay Guida, an output machine like Clay Guida, at plus 210, that's a very intriguing price tag. This guy could absolutely steal the fight in the judges' eyes if it reaches the scorecards. So the movement in Clay Guida, you can say what you want about his deterring durability as well too. In that Jim Miller fight, he got cracked. He cracked Jim Miller, and then he in turn got cracked himself, and then ended up giving up a guillotine choke there. But his loss before that was Charles Oliveira, which is nothing to really sneeze at. Before that, Brian Ortega, again, a very tough one. Thiago Tavares, Dennis Bermudez, Chad Mendes, Gray Maynard, Ben Henderson. He's losing to decent and legit guys. Thiago Tavares had a rough stretch in the UFC at a certain point, but that guy was very talented as well too. Wins over Hatsu Hioki, Tatsuya Kawajiri, Robbie Peralta, Eric Koh, Joe Lozon, BJ Penn. The BJ Penn one I'll kind of just write off. But I think that Clay Guida still has some fight in him. And again, he always makes fights interesting with his output and his activity. And I expect this fight to go to a decision. And in that decision, I'm going to pre-fight. I'm going to lean with the guy that has the higher output, has the better cardio, has, okay, maybe not. He definitely has the better cardio, but I'm not sure if that's going to amount or mean as much in 15 minutes than it would in a 25-minute fight. But I will still give him the cardio and output advantage here over Bobby Green. I love Bobby Green's striking. He could absolutely clip Clay Guida on the way coming in here. But again, lack of urgency at times is very concerning for Bobby Green. So if you're putting the money on him, I think you're kind of expecting him to get the finish. And if you don't see him being able to get the finish in this fight, you got to side with Clay Guida. So I'm going to actually go with Clay Guida here. That's going to be my underdog pick. He might even be a bet as well too. I think he holds a ton of value at that plus 210 line, especially against, a fighter that lacks a lot of urgency in Bobby Green. So I'm going to go with Clay Guida to win this fight by decision. Just combinations, in and out movement. I'm banking on him to avoid the big shots of Bobby Green, but if Bobby Green really doesn't put it together, he's going to let this fight slip away from him just as he did his last two fights. So I'm going to go with Clay Guida to pull off the upset here. And again, plus 210, crazy line. So I might actually be placing a bet on that myself. Jim Miller versus Roosevelt Roberts. We got minus 250 on Roosevelt Roberts and plus 210 on Jim Miller here. Let's start off with Jim Miller. Vet of the UFC game. We obviously know that he's been around for a long time. He holds one of the records in terms of, most UFC fights, I believe. It may have been overtaken by Cowboy Cerrone at this point, but this guy is definitely up there in terms of the amount of fights that he's had in the UFC. He's currently coming off a loss to Scott Holtzman last time around, where Holtzman was just a faster, quicker striker, was able to evade, any of the jiu-jitsu game that Jim Miller was going to try to implement there. And then before that, Miller was actually coming off of two victories, one over Jason Gonzalez, rear naked choke, and then one over Clay Guida, which was a 58-second guillotine choke after he had hurt him. He got hurt first, and then he hurt Clay Guida, and then he was able to latch on to that guillotine and get the choke there. And this fight, he comes up against a young up-and-comer who has a ton of potential. And I believe that the potential that Roosevelt Roberts brings, the parts of the game that he is still a little bit green in and possibly needs a little bit more, work to do, is his grappling. His grappling has been quite good in some of his fights, and especially when he's the one imposing it himself. But when it's opponents imposing it on him, his takedown defense just doesn't seem the greatest. His hands are going to obviously be more crisper. They're going to be faster. He has great straight shots down the middle. It should definitely give Jim Miller problems. But if Jim Miller starts to initiate the clinch and starts to go for takedowns, it could get a little bit fishy for Roosevelt Roberts. Let's just take into consideration that Roosevelt Roberts has only been training in MMA for the last 3 years. 3 years ago, let's take this into context. Jim Miller was on a 4-fight losing streak to Dustin Poirier, Anthony Pettis, Francisco Trinaldo, Dan Hooker. And since that time, how many fights has he had since 2017? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 fights, and Roosevelt Roberts is coming in with about 11 fights in that amount of time. And then, that's 9 out of how many fights? 35, 45, 36 fights. 36 fights before that Jim Miller had in experience, and especially most of them being in the UFC as well too. So that's something to really hold his hat on. I think the line is a little bit too wide. Going into this, I was really thinking that I was going to be making Roosevelt Roberts my lock of the night play, but it's hard to do that when you see a little bit of a chink in his armor, especially a chink in his armor that Jim Miller could possibly exploit. And we know how high level his jiu-jitsu is. I don't think that Roosevelt Roberts' jiu-jitsu is at that point yet. So if this fight does find itself on the ground, I think he's going to have a lot of trouble there. My only concern here with Jim Miller is, being able to close a distance properly without eating too many shots, without getting put out. Roosevelt Roberts definitely has some pop on his shots. At plus 210, man, it's hard not to want to bet Jim Miller here. There's a lot of other dogs on the card that are barking. We got Tecia Torres, and then there was one more. Clay Guida is another one too. But I think that all three of these dogs hold some value, and Jim Miller is kind of leading the way for that for me. we saw Vince Piechota go out there and give Roosevelt Roberts his first loss, but Piechota is obviously a bigger, stronger wrestler, in my opinion, than Jim Miller. But I think that Jim Miller is just like tough and gritty, and that he could, be able to eat a couple of the first shots from Roosevelt Roberts just to close the distance, start to clinch up, and drag this fight to the ground where he's going to be a little bit more comfortable. I still need to see a little bit of improvements in Roberts' game in terms of his takedown defense, and he has done good jobs in terms of reversing positions and getting up from his back. He had a ton of success against Alexander Yakovlev, which I believe was his first fight back from that loss that he had, or his first professional loss to Vince Piechota. So he is definitely working on his game, but man, like plus 210 on a gritty vet like Jim Miller who could exploit the weaknesses of Roosevelt Roberts, it's very, very intriguing. So I am actually going to side with the dog here. There might be a bet coming in on Jim Miller from my end as well too. But yeah, I really like... I like Jim Miller here. I think he's going to get Roberts down, and I think he'll find the choke. So I'll say first or second round Jim Miller via choke. Roosevelt Roberts, in my opinion, is a little bit too big of a favorite here. It's the line should not be this wide, in my opinion. Lyman Good versus Belal Muhammad. We got minus 115 on Remember the Name and plus 105 on Lyman Good. Let's start off with Belal Muhammad here. He's coming off of 2 victories over Takashi Sato in a fight where he was able to get the rear naked choke at UFC 242. That was a big win for him in front of the Abu Dhabi crowd. And then Curtis Millender, he was able to pretty much grapple fuck him that entire fight. Millender didn't really have anything off the ground, wasn't able to really establish much on the feet. And then Belal Muhammad was able to grapple his way to victory there. And then the fight before that, a loss to Jeff Neal. No, you can't really be too mad at that. Jeff Neal is on a huge rise right now in the UFC, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he has in his future fights. Lyman Good, on the other hand, is coming over a beautiful win over Chance Country, where he was able to get a late finish in the third round. But before that, he got rear naked choke by Damian Maia. Before that, he absolutely put out Ben Saunders. And then the fight before that, he got slightly outstruck by Elizeu Zaleski and lost a split decision there. Now, here he is against Belal Muhammad, and this is a very intriguing fight on both sides. Lyman Good, obviously a very, very good Muay Thai fighter, trains with Tiger Showman and that crew over there. And they have a really gifted athlete here. Say what you want about his physique. It's clear the guy's on something. It's, he's getting by you. I think he has gotten caught in the past before, but whatever he's doing right now, good for him. That is the absolute pinnacle of a male physique. If you show that to anybody, I think The Rock would even be, jealous of what Lyman Good's working with here. But, I think he'll have the strength advantage here. The main thing for him is going to have to be his cardio. As long as he keeps that in check, he should be able to outstrike Belal Muhammad here, and he should be able to keep this fight on the feet too. I think Belal is really going to have to count on his durability in this fight because he's going to eat a lot of shots from Lyman Good. And I think that he's going to try to continuously close the distance and try to get this fight to the ground, but I don't think that he's going to be successful in doing so. I think that Lyman Good will be able to shuck off and really defend takedowns early on and then land big damage in return, and it's really going to deter Belal Muhammad from closing distance later on in the fight. The crisper striking is obviously Lyman Good. He has years of experience just strictly striking. Belal Muhammad has gotten away with his durability in certain fights, but Vicente Luque was able to put him out just clean. That was one of the crazier knockouts that we've seen. Jeff Neal, I was surprised he wasn't able to put him out, but I think that Lyman Good probably has the best chance now in terms of putting Belal Muhammad out. And it pains me to say this against Belal Muhammad because I think he has a great style. If he's able to withstand big shots from Lyman Good, he should be able to make this fight a little bit dirtier, a little bit grindier. He should be able to get Lyman Good down. But I think his main path to victory here would have to be pushing Lyman Good up against the cage, kneeing him, sucking out the power of him. But I find that hard to believe with how Lyman Good has looked. And say what you want about Damian Maia beating Lyman Good. Damian Maia is just a wizard when it comes to jiu-jitsu, or even if you let him just get his arms clasped around you, you're going to find yourself in a submission somehow, some way. Unfortunately for Belal Muhammad, he doesn't have that good of jiu-jitsu. He has good wrestling. He does a good job in terms of mixing his striking with his grappling. But I think he's going to have a little bit of a harder time doing that to Lyman Good here. I expect Lyman Good to, initiate kicks often, keeping Belal at range. I think he's going to have a little bit of a height and reach advantage here. We got 5'10", 71-inch reach for Belal, 6 foot, 73-inch for Lyman Good. So not the crazy biggest size discrepancy there, but still a little bit of a size advantage for Lyman Good here. I'm kind of expecting a knockout for Lyman Good. And even if he doesn't, if that doesn't come to fruition, I could absolutely see him, outstriking Belal Muhammad for 2 rounds here at minimum. As long as he's able to keep it on the feet, as long as he doesn't blow his gas tank within a round, he should be good to win at least 2 rounds and then, really shuck off any type of submissions or TKO potential for Belal Muhammad in round 3. So I like Lyman Good here. I'm going to take him to win this fight. I'll probably even take him to win this fight by first round KO. And I like him at the plus money that he's at too. He might actually be my dog of the night play here. Plus 105, not the hugest underdog, but still somebody that I believe has a lot of potential as cashing as an underdog here. So I'll go with Lyman Good to win by first round KO. Tough night for Belal Muhammad. But again, if he's really able to get that clinch game going and that wrestling game going, it could be a long night for Lyman Good as well too. But at the close odds here, I got to kind of side with Lyman Good, as I believe that he'll have the huge striking advantage and obviously power advantage and strength advantage, albeit for maybe a round and a half or so. But it should be enough to allow him to get a first round TKO victory over Belal Muhammad here. Raquel Pennington versus Marion Reneau. We got minus 185 for Raquel Pennington, plus 160 for Marion Reneau. Let's start off with Marion Reneau here. She's coming off a loss to Yana Kunitskaya, who did a really good job in terms of keeping the distance against her. And then whenever they were in clinch positions, she did a really good job in terms of overpowering her and making it a longer night for Marion Reneau. That fight did end in that third round with Marion Reneau really putting it on Yana Kunitskaya and really busting up her face. And when you kind of see the judge's decision and you see both women, you're like, okay, the girl probably who doesn't have a busted up face is probably the one that won. But, that's where like 10-9s and 10-8s really come into consideration. I'm not saying that round was a 10-8 for Marion Reneau, but aesthetically, you can't really be making judge calls or anything off that based on how a fighter looks at the end of a fight. But Yana Kunitskaya did a really good job with her striking there. Before that, she got out-wrestled and out-grappled by Kat Zingano, and then before that, she was able to pull off a triangle choke against Sarah McMahon. Marion Reneau is a woman that I kind of like in terms of whenever she's an underdog. I think she's always a live dog. She has decent striking. I believe she has a black belt now. That her Tapology picture actually has her as with her brown belt getting awarded, but she has really good jiu-jitsu. In terms of getting the fight to that realm is kind of skeptical. It's kind of iffy whether she'll for sure be able to get it there. But that's where I think that Raquel Pennington actually has the advantage when it gets to the striking realm. Raquel Pennington is not anything crazy good. We saw in her fight against Amanda Nunes, and obviously it's Amanda Nunes. That woman is probably the greatest woman of all time, greatest woman fighter of all time, I should say. And she got absolutely outclassed there. Jermaine Durandamy absolutely outclasses her on the feet there too. In the Irene Aldana fight, who, she is actually supposed to be headlining against Holly Holm in the coming months, she did a decent job of nullifying the striking and the reach of Irene Aldana. Aldana obviously had a reach advantage going into that fight, but she was whiffing on a lot of her shots because Raquel Pennington was moving very well. She was really evading the shots well too, and then she was able to counter effectively as well too once Irene was actually very close to her and within striking distance. So she has decent fight IQ. Decent hands, obviously that's where she makes her most money is when she's able to utilize her striking. She does decent in the clinch game as well too, and I think that she might have a little bit of a power advantage and size advantage and strength advantage against Marion Reneau here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see her kind of do what Holly Holm did to her, which was just push her up against the cage, make it a tough fight, dirty boxing, knees inside, make it really tough for Marion Reneau to, one, get a takedown, which I don't think she'll be able to get, and two, be effective on the feet. My only concern here, though, is it's minus 185 for Raquel Pennington. In my opinion, that's too wide of a line. I think that she will win this fight. I think that she'll win it off of her striking. She'll be able to move effectively, use her hands in and out. Great counters as well, too. Again, Marion is not super green on the feet, but she could use some work, and I think that Pennington would be able to exploit the striking advantage here. But it will get a little bit hairy if this fight somehow hits the ground. I'm not completely counting that scenario out, which is why I'm not comfortable at playing Raquel Pennington at the minus 185 line that she's currently at. Just man, it's tough. Like, she's 10-8. She's a middle tier fighter at this division, and Marion Reneau just hit 43 years old too. So she's, if she's going to start showing any signs of decline, it might be this fight. Obviously, she's already coming off of 2 losses as well too, so maybe she's already on her decline. But yeah, this fight's a stay away fight for me. If I'm going to lean one way, I'd probably go with the value side, which is Marion Reneau. So if you want to bet this fight, Reneau is probably the side to go. But in terms of picking, I'm going to go with Pennington. I think that she'll pretty much strike her way to victory. I don't think that we're going to see a finish here unless it's Reneau getting this fight to the ground and pulling off a submission of some sort. But I like Pennington. She has great cardio too, training over there in Denver. Solid cardio. She's always shown solid cardio in all of her fights. And if she's able to put on a bit of a pace and pressure on Marion Reneau, she could probably break her midway through the fight. But still, I see her taking this fight to a decision and winning this fight via decision. Shane Burgos versus Josh Emmett. We got minus 140 on Shane Burgos and plus 130 on Josh Emmett. This is the co-main event of the evening. Let's start off with Josh Emmett first and foremost. So he's coming off a victory over Mirsad Bektik, where he was able to just plant him on the bout with the power jab and then got some ground and pound off after that, which kind of really cemented Mirsad Bektik's decline for good. I believe Bektik actually ended up losing to Dan Ige after that. But anyways, before that, we had Josh Emmett fighting Michael Johnson in a fight that he was kind of getting lit up on the feet, and then, was able to find that big overhand right at the end, and able to put out Michael Johnson there. And then in the fight before that, he had a very, very bad fight against Jeremy Stephens, where Jeremy Stephens was able to put him out and actually made him pretty much useless, or not even useless. I just mean like he didn't have a fight for at least a year and a month after that, because he sustained so many injuries off of that one knockout. In the Michael Johnson fight, I pulled up the stats here. I just wanted to see this one sec. It's interesting that Michael Johnson only landed 24 significant strikes over that roughly 14 minutes before he finally got knocked out. One thing that was pretty evident in Josh Emmett's early UFC career is that he really liked, going for the takedowns. Besides that John Tuck fight, he landed 8 takedowns in that Scott Holtzman fight, but then landed 1 in the Felipe Arantes fight. But since then, it seems like he's fallen in love with his striking. He was able to knock out Ricardo Lamas, obviously got knocked out by Jeremy Stephens, knocked out Michael Johnson, and knocked out Mirsad Bektik. Here he's going to have a little bit harder of a time trying to knock out Shane Burgos, who in my opinion is the far superior striker, probably the best striker that he's faced till this point. Jeremy Stephens is a decent striker, but Shane Burgos has this different Muay Thai about him, a different type of power and a different type of killer instinct. And his size and his strength really gives issues to a lot of guys too. So in terms of the reach advantage, I believe Burgos has a slight reach advantage, 75.5 inches for Burgos, 70 inches for Emmett. Emmett's standing at 5'6", and we have 5'11" for Burgos, so he'll have a pretty sizable advantage, no pun intended. Especially on the feet too. I think that he'll be able to light up Josh Emmett on the feet, and we've seen that in the past before, where Emmett has kind of gotten lit up on the feet, but then he kind of relies on his power a little bit too much. I'd be surprised if we didn't see Emmett go for takedowns in this fight, as I feel like that could be his path to victory. In Shane Burgos' last fight, we saw against Makwan Amirkhani, Amirkhani had a little bit of success whenever he tried to initiate the clinch or even takedowns. He was able to get Burgos down in that first round, but Burgos did a good job of working back up. And then after that, it was really hard for Makwan to get him back down. Burgos did a great job in terms of sprawling and then working out of those positions. There was even a point in time where Burgos dropped Mirkani, was in his guard for a little bit, and stayed out of all the submissions and still landed big shots. But I'm not trying to compare Makwan and Emmett to the fullest extent. I believe that Emmett is a slightly stronger wrestler. I think he's stronger as well too. So that could play a factor here. If he's able to clinch Burgos up against the cage, he can make it a little bit dirtier of a fight. He could drag Burgos down and probably lay on top. But the fact that we haven't seen that from Emmett's game as much recently, and the fact that he has a 45% takedown success rate, leads me to believe that, as long as Burgos is able to survive that first round, he should be okay to, stuff and sprawl on takedowns for the rest of the 10 minutes if this fight does end up going to 15 minutes. But it's hard not to back Shane Burgos here. He's at the odds, minus 140. That's not bad odds either. It's not like a dog or pass situation at this point. Shane Burgos has ridiculously good striking, and to have your only loss to Calvin Kattar is not a bad thing. His kicks are insane. His striking, he's able to change stances with ease. He seems so confident in there too. And then when he just like puffs his chest and walks around like with his arms kind of down and has that gorilla type of stance, it's very intimidating for certain fighters, especially when he's able to get his shots off and his confidence starts to grow. So for me to believe that Shane Burgos is not going to win this fight, it would have to entail Josh Emmett making this a clinch heavy fight, grapple heavy fight. But it's hard for me to see him close that distance without eating big shots and then slowly starting to lose confidence as the fight goes on. So it's tough for me to not back Shane Burgos here. I like him in this spot. I think he has a ton of potential still. This is a big fight for him. It's kind of a spit in the face for him too, as a co-main event, to not be put on the to not be put on the poster. It's a little, again, like I said, it's a spit in the face. Josh Emmett has headlined a card in the past, so they can't even say that, okay, neither of these guys are poster worthy. You have a card coming up next weekend with Mickey Gall and Mike Perry on the poster. That's, again, another spit in the face. I just don't get it. It's not a good look, especially when you have a guy that's very talented like Shane Burgos. And Burgos is very entertaining as a fighter as well too. So you guys can easily push him. He goes out there always looking for the finish, always looking for those openings to get the finish. And I like Burgos, man. I'm going to take him to win this fight probably by second or third round TKO. The under is probably a good spot here too. I just want to see what that number is currently at. We got under 2.5 at minus 137. I don't mind that bet at all. Like, I think if there is a bet to make here, it's probably that under 2.5, because I could see Burgos finishing. But in case Josh Emmett lands that hammer, that bet is also covered as well too. But in terms of picking a side, I'm going to take Burgos here. I'll take him to win by second round TKO and to look amazing here. And again, the sky's the limit for this kid. I wouldn't mind eventually seeing him against Kattar again, because that was a really good fight. But yeah, I'm going to go with Shane Burgos to win this fight by second round TKO. But the under 2.5 is probably where you should lay your money. All right, time for the main event. We got Curtis Razor Blaydes versus Alexander Volkov. We got minus 430 on Curtis Blaydes, plus 345 on Alexander Volkov. Let's start off with Curtis Blaydes. So it's quite obvious. This guy's somebody that's going to be hovering around the top three ish of the heavyweight division because he has so much talent. A great wrestling game, holds records in terms of like most takedowns in a fight, and he's really racking it up in terms of how many takedowns he's gotten in his UFC career. But once he gets the fight to the ground, his ground and pound is absolutely ridiculous. What he was able to do to Alistair Overeem was a thing of beauty. But his striking game is slowly starting to catch up with his wrestling game, and we saw that in the Junior Dos Santos fight. And I believe that striking game isn't possible, or the improvements of his striking game isn't possible without that powerful wrestling game. And even though he wasn't able to get Junior Dos Santos down in that fight, the threat of the takedown, the consistent threat of the takedown, really made Junior Dos Santos have to think about what's coming back his way, which really opened up the striking and the hands of Curtis Blaydes, which eventually led to the finish of Junior Dos Santos. It's unfortunate that Curtis Blaydes has a Francis Ngannou to worry about. I believe if he doesn't get clipped by that big shot of Francis Ngannou, it could be a really, really long night for Francis. That's why I believe that Blaydes was the favorite going into that fight because, outside of that one kill shot that Francis Ngannou has, and more often than not, he lands it. Besides the Stipe fight and besides the Derek Lewis fights, Francis is always able to find the target, and he just hits so fucking hard that it's just hard for people to get out of the way. And again, he has explosiveness and speed, which allows him to connect with that power and really make it tough for people. But without Francis Ngannou, Curtis Blaydes is probably up there as number one contender. He's up there as, a guy that could be fighting for the belt and actually be a legitimate champion. I think if we matched him up against Stipe Miocic would be in for a tough night. I think Curtis Blaydes would absolutely ragdoll him. People can say what they want about like Stipe's credentials and his resume and all that stuff. I'm just not the biggest believer in Stipe. Stipe is kind of lucky regarding the landscape of the heavyweight division. I'll give him the Francis Ngannou win in terms of being able to avoid that power or even eating the shots that he was able to eat and still trudge forward and actually get the victory there. But I think Curtis Blaydes is just another level. We've seen him go, the hard rounds that he needs to. Consistent takedowns, absolutely pummeling his opponents. We've seen it all from Curtis Blaydes. It's just, again, Francis Ngannou. So you got to find a way to continuously progress Curtis Blaydes. And it doesn't seem like he's taking steps forward because we already know he's a top 3 guy. We know he deserves a title shot. So you're kind of walking diagonally with Curtis Blaydes whenever you're matching people up against him. Let's just take in his resume real quick since coming into the UFC. First and foremost, gets that Francis Ngannou loss via, his eyes swelling up and not being able to see. Then he had the Cody East fight, won that. Adam Milstead, I believe that was overturned because he tested positive for marijuana. Beats Daniel Omielanchuk, Alexei Oleinik, Mark Hunt. A beautiful finish over Alistair Overeem from elbows in the guard. Absolutely beautiful there. Then runs into Francis Ngannou once again, 45 seconds into that fight, gets TKO'd. And then he comes back with Justin Willis, Shamil Abdurakhimov, and then most recently Junior Dos Santos. And here he is now against Alexander Volkov. Drago has had a decent go in the UFC since making his way over from Bellator and M1. Started his stretch off with Timothy Johnson, Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, Fabrizio Verdum, pretty much undefeated up until he ran into Derek Lewis. He was 11 seconds away from coming away with the victory in that fight. I remember having Volkov as the lock of the night play there, and obviously very, very demoralizing seeing him get pummeled in that last 10 to 15 seconds. And then he comes back off a little bit of a layoff. He was off for about a year and a month. And then he steps in and fights Greg Hardy and just absolutely outpoints him. Pretty much styles on him. Greg Hardy is just far too green to fight a guy as weathered and as with as much veteran experience as Alexander Volkov. But Volkov is going up against a very tough test here against Curtis Blaydes now. In terms of the wrestling, I think Blaydes is going to get him down with relative ease. We saw Fabrizio Verdum get that takedown with, again, relative ease, and Fabrizio Verdum isn't the most credentialed wrestler, and he doesn't really have the greatest takedowns out there. He kind of just rushes forward and tries to get takedowns. Curtis Blaydes, on the other hand, great takedowns, great entries. His improvements in his hands and his power and his confidence in his hands too are only going to help his takedown games even more now. So I think we'll see Blaydes kind of play this fight on the feet a little bit. He doesn't really have to worry too much about knockout power or anything like that coming back from Volkov. I think Volkov is more of a duration and a repetitive, consistent knockout artist in terms of, he needs to land multiple shots to be able to finish an opponent. It's not like a one-punch knockout and he needs to worry about that. I think Blaydes will do a decent enough job eating whatever shots Volkov initially throws at him, but I think that Volkov will get him down early and often. I think Blaydes will get him down early and often, really work his top game. And at that minus 425 range, I think he's probably worthy. I personally don't like to play straights or anything worse than minus 350, so if maybe Blaydes was roughly around that minus 300, minus 350 range, I would have played that. Not here though. Minus 425, a little bit too steep for me. But again, I think he is definitely parlay worthy. So if you have something else on the card that you're looking at, he's definitely worth that shot, in my opinion. I think Blaydes is just gonna come in here and just run through Volkov. I love Volkov. I think he has a ton of potential, but this is just a bad stylistic matchup for him, especially from the lack of takedown defense we've seen from him in the past. It's hard for me not to believe that Curtis Blaydes will be able to get this fight down pretty much at will, and then I could see him getting maybe a second round TKO via ground and pound, maybe even first round TKO if Blaydes is able to land some beautiful elbows. The one thing that Blaydes will have to need to kind of worry about is Volkov is kind of lengthy, so just on the ground, be wary of arm bars, be wary of triangles. Be wary of the dexterity and the flexibility of Alexander Volkov. Other than that, I think Curtis Blaydes will be fine. I'm not too worried about that, but I think that Blaydes is a definitely solid spot and a good parlay piece for this card. So I'm going to take him to win by second round TKO. Definitely a good parlay piece if you want to juicing up a different fighter or something like that. So let's go with Blaydes via second round TKO. All right. That's UFC Vegas 3. This is the second last card of the stretch that they're currently on. Then we get a weekend off for July 4th, and then we're back at it for that huge UFC 251, I think it is, or 252, 251 probably. Big card there, 3 title fights. I'm really looking forward to that. Then I believe we have July 11th, which is Saturday. Then we have July 15th, which is a Wednesday. Then July 18th again, which is a Saturday. So 3 fights in the span of 7 or 8 days, which is really good. So I'm really going to, take my time during this one week off that we're going to have after the June 27th card and really pump out maybe a breakdown or 2 every day on my Patreon. Again, if you guys follow the Patreon, I drop all these breakdowns as soon as I finish recording them. I drop them on the Patreon so that you guys can dissect them ASAP and not have to worry about me putting out the full podcast. So there's that. Lastly, before I get out of here, the Dog of the Night Challenge, the registrations end on Sunday. So the day after this UFC Vegas 3 event, the Dog of the Night Challenge registrations. Apologies, I had to get that yawn and I was fighting it through this whole fucking breakdown. But regardless, the Dog of the Night Challenge breakdown or deadline is actually the day after this UFC Vegas 3 event. Quick rundown of what the Dog of the Night Challenge is. You pick for 10 events, you pick one Dog of the Night, whether it's an underdog fighter or a plus money over under. There's no props, nothing like that. It has to be either a total or a money line bet. You pick for 10 events, you pick one of them for every event, and whoever accumulates the most amount of profit at the end of the event claims the prize. We get obviously 65% paid out to first place, 25% paid out to second place, 10% paid out to third place. And yeah, that's the entire pot. I don't keep any of it. I just give it out to everybody if you guys buy it. There's a $25 game and there's a $100 game this time around too. So if you're interested, hit me up on Twitter at MMA Lockcast. I'll be happy to take your registrations there. And yeah, a Lock of the Night Challenge, that's going to be restarting after June 27th. So I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next podcast. But if you're interested in the Dog of the Night Challenge, hit me up and I'll be happy to sign you up. And you can go up against other guys that are, we had 29 participants in the first edition of the Dog of the Night Challenge. I'm hoping to get that number to 35 or 40 for this second one. And then obviously a little bit more in the $100 one too, because that should be fun. It's for the sharps, man. If you really want to make a name for yourself and you're on Twitter and you're one of these cappers, making a name for yourself in the Dog of the Night Challenge is probably a really good thing. I promote these guys a lot too. You'll see me on a weekly basis. If there's somebody that hits a big play or whoever's in the top 3, I tweet them out every week. So it's good exposure for you guys as well too. So that's something that I'd like to give in exchange as well for you guys to participate in this thing. All right. That's about it. I appreciate you guys joining me for the podcast. Make sure you guys check out the website, MMALOTN.ca. I got my free picks posted on there so you guys can check that out. And then obviously the best way to get in contact with me or follow along with what my thought process is and all that stuff is at MMALOTN on Twitter. And then lastly, shout out the Patreon as always. Make sure you guys check out my Patreon. I got a bunch of good perks there, including early access to the breakdowns for these fights. Everything that you need to know about it is in the description below, so make sure you guys check that out. And if you haven't already, subscribe. I'm close to that. I'm getting inching closer and closer to my 1,000 subscriber mark before the end of the summer. Hit that 900 mark a couple weeks ago. Trying to continue that snowball and just get over to that 1,000 mark before the end of the summer. So again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps your boy out a ton. That's the least you guys can do for all this content I keep putting out for you guys. All right, that's it. I'm gonna shut the fuck up. Good luck on your bets this weekend, and I'll see you guys next week.